"Wait," she says, and the courtyard freezes, because the poorest girl just bought the deadliest man. The law can't save her when he stands, eyes burning gold, and the wind whispers of bonds and ruin. When he claims her before dawn, will it save them or start a war? Would you spend your last coins to free a man everyone calls a monster? Tell me in the comments, would you walk away or risk everything for a stranger's soul? And don't forget to subscribe, because what happens after this choice will break the moon's law itself. The warden's amusement faded. The old law of ransom had been forgotten by all but the desperate. Yet it was still binding. "So be it," he said, sneering. "The beast, it is yours." Gasps rippled through the crowd as guards shoved the prisoner forward. He staggered, eyes narrowing when he saw who had bought him. A slip of a girl with dust on her cheeks, and courage where her fear should have been. "Why?" he rasped, voice like gravel and thunder. She hesitated. "Because you're dying." He almost smiled. "Then you've bought yourself a corpse." "Maybe," she whispered. "But I don't believe the moon makes mistakes." Their eyes met. His gold, hers dark with defiance. And for a heartbeat, the world fell silent. Even the banners stilled. The mark beneath her wrist burned faintly, though she couldn't see it yet. When the guards unchained him and left, the crowd began to murmur again. About the foolish servant girl who'd wasted her last coins on a monster. Lyra reached out a hand to help him stand. He took it. The air between them hummed. Faint, electric, inevitable. She didn't yet know the man she'd just freed was the Alpha King in chains. And before the next sunrise, the destiny she'd bought for him would claim her too. The torches along the dungeon wall burned low, feeding on damp air and rot. Water dripped from the ceiling in a steady rhythm, each drop echoing like a heartbeat through the stone corridor. Lyra hesitated at the bottom of the stairwell, one hand clutching the edge of her candle. She wasn't supposed to be here. No servant was. The dungeon was reserved for the kingdom's worst, for traitors, sorcerers, and things whispered about in frightened tones. And yet, she had to see him. The cell door groaned as she pressed her shoulder against it. The sound of chains shifting answered from the dark. Then she saw him. The man they called a monster sat shackled to the far wall, wrists bound by silver links that glowed faintly against his skin. His chest rose with slow, labored breaths. Dried blood clung to his ribs, black in the torchlight. His head was bowed, but even in ruin, he radiated a power that didn't belong in cages. When her candle flickered closer, he lifted his face. Eyes like molten gold met hers, sharp, unyielding, ancient. Lyra's pulse faltered. Every instinct screamed to run, but instead, she stepped closer. "I brought you water," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He said nothing. "I'm not here to hurt you." Still silence. Then, slowly, he spoke. The words rolling from his tongue like thunder wrapped in velvet. "You shouldn't be here." "I clean these halls," she murmured, kneeling beside the bars. "It's my duty." He tilted his head, studying her, "Sir." "No cleaner carries fear like that." Her breath caught. He could smell it. The first night, she left the jug and fled before courage could betray her. The second night, she brought bread. By the third, she found herself listening for his voice long before she reached the dungeon door. Each time, he sat in the same position, still watching. He never begged, never threatened. When she asked his name, he gave it without hesitation. Kael. The sound of it filled the air like a promise and a curse all at once. Lyra brought herbs for his wounds. She tore linen from her own apron to bind them. Every time her fingers brushed his skin, the air thickened, like the dungeon itself was holding its breath. And something in her stirred. A hum beneath her skin, a pulse in her palms. Once, when she pressed a cloth against his burn, the silver hissed and cooled beneath her touch. She jerked her hand back, eyes wide. Kael's gaze sharpened. "What are you?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Just a servant." He smiled faintly. A dangerous, knowing curve. No servant makes silver lose its bite. That night, she dreamt of a forest bathed in moonlight. Wolves stood in a circle, watching her. One lowered its head and whispered her name in a voice that was both hers and not hers. When she woke, she was crying. The next evening, she returned to find the guards drunk outside the dungeon door, dice scattered between them. Lyra slipped past and found Kael bleeding again, fresh welts carved into his back. "They said you bit a soldier," she whispered. He turned, eyes glinting. He struck first. "They'll kill you if you fight. They'll kill me if I don't." Lyra's throat tightened. "Why won't you beg for mercy?" His voice was low, tired. "Because mercy isn't meant for creatures like me." Something inside her broke. She stepped closer, ignoring the smell of blood, ignoring the fear clawing at her ribs. "You're wrong." He looked up sharply. "And what would you know of mercy, girl?" She swallowed. "I live beneath its feet every day. It only looks down when it's already too late." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Kael whispered, almost to himself, "You sound like her." "Who?" "The one I lost." Lyra didn't ask more. She only pressed the rag to his wounds and let silence do what words could not. On the sixth night, thunder rolled above the palace. The storm rattled the dungeon door, spilling cold air into the dark. Lyra came late, soaked to the bone, clutching a candle that sputtered against the wind. Kael was shivering. Fever had taken him. His skin burned where the silver touched, the runes pulsing with light. "Kael," she whispered, "you need water." He groaned but didn't respond. His body convulsed, chains clanging against stone. Without thinking, she reached to steady him. The moment her hand touched his arm, the air exploded. Light seared the darkness. The silver glowed white hot, then cracked, a single link snapping loose. The candle went out. Lyra stumbled back, clutching her wrist. Her skin burned, marked by a faint crescent of silver light. Kael's breathing steadied. When his eyes opened, they weren't gold anymore. They were glowing. "You." His voice shook with disbelief. "You carry her blood." "What are you talking about?" "The moon's blood," he whispered. "The line that heals and binds." Lyra shook her head. "You're delirious." "Maybe." His lips curved, weak, but certain. Or maybe destiny decided to visit me one last time. The next morning she overheard the guards. The king had ordered Kael's execution, sunset, by fire. Her stomach turned to ice. She tried to work through the day, but the sound of crackling flames haunted every heartbeat. That night, she stood at the barred door again. Kael was awake, watching her as if he'd been waiting. "They're going to kill you," she said. He nodded. Burning's their favorite trick. It doesn't always work. It will this time. The chains? Over fire, he interrupted. No beast survives it. Lyra gripped the bars. Then fight back. You're strong, you... His laugh was hollow. Strength isn't freedom, not here. Tears stung her eyes. There has to be a way. He tilted his head, studying her. "Would you save me then?" "The monster in the king's pit." She looked down at her calloused hands. "You're not a monster." Kael's expression softened. "Just for a breath. Careful, girl. Believing that could get you killed." "Then I'll die believing it." The silence that followed felt sacred. The flicker of torches painted her face in golden shadow. Finally, Kael spoke, voice rough. "If you free me, you change everything. Do you understand that?" She met his gaze. "I don't care about everything." "Then what do you care about?" Her voice trembled. "You." When dawn bled into the dungeon, Lyra waited until the guards left for breakfast. Her hands shook as she pried open the old locks with a hairpin and a prayer. Each click echoed like thunder. Kael's chains loosened. He didn't move, didn't breathe, until the last shackle hit the floor. "Go," she whispered, "before they see." He stood, towering and silent. "And you?" "I'll be fine." His hand brushed her cheek, rough and cold. "No," he said softly. "You won't." Then he stepped into the shadows and was gone. Lyra collapsed against the wall, her pulse roaring in her ears. For a moment, she thought it was over, until the mark on her wrist flared again, bright as the moon itself. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a howl answered it, and she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she hadn't freed a man. She had unleashed destiny. The morning sky bled pale gold over the palace courtyard. Smoke from the braziers coiled upward, clinging to the chill air. A crowd had already gathered. Nobles in silks, servants in rags, guards in gleaming armor, all waiting to watch a monster die. They dragged Kael into the square. Shackles cut into his wrists, each link of silver hissing where it met his skin. He stumbled once but did not kneel. His hair hung in tangled ropes over his face, blood drying in dark streaks down his back. The herald unrolled a crimson scroll and raised his voice for all to hear. "By command of the crown, this creature known as Kael, raider and defiler, is sentenced to death by fire. His life may be bought only by silver of equal worth to the crimes committed." Laughter rolled through the crowd. No one would waste silver on a beast. Lyra stood behind the line of guards, broom still clutched in the one hand. The wind whipped her servant's cloak against her legs. Every word from the herald struck her chest like a drumbeat. She had freed him once, and he'd run. She had thought that was the end. Yet now, here he was, dragged back in chains. Her throat ached as the guards shoved Kael onto the execution platform. The priest lifted a torch. That was when he looked up. Through the smoke and distance, his golden eyes found hers again. Something ancient and unspoken leapt between them. a pull so strong it silenced her fear. "Any who would pay his debt may speak," the herald mocked, raising his torch higher. "If the gods pity the fool." Lyra's voice cracked the silence. "I will." The torch froze mid-air. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, like wind through reeds. The herald frowned, searching for the source. She stepped forward. A small figure in a grey servant's cloak, hair unbound, face pale for as morning frost. Her hands shook as she reached into her apron and drew out a tiny pouch. "I will pay," she said again. The herald sneered. "And what can a palace cleaner pay with, girl? Dust and tears?" Lyra opened her palm. 3 copper coins gleamed in the light. Gasps. Laughter. Mockery. But the law was older than the laughter. The priest hesitated. "The decree says only this. A life may be bought if the ransom be offered freely." He looked at the herald. "Even copper carries weight when given in full." "No!" a noble woman hissed. "You can't trade a beast's blood for scraps." But the crowd had gone still. The old rule was binding. The herald's lip curled. "Very well," he spat. "The life is hers." The guards released Kael's chains. He staggered, blinking at the light, then turned toward Lyra. The wind caught his torn shirt, revealing the scars carved into his chest, runes that still smoldered faintly from the silver. He stared at her, disbelief etched deep in his face. "Why?" he rasped. Lyra's voice barely carried. "Because no one else would." The crowd jeered again, shouting curses at her. A pebble struck her shoulder. She didn't flinch. Kael's gaze flickered to the mark on her wrist, faint but glowing softly beneath the dirt. His expression changed. Recognition, awe, fear all at once. 2 guards moved to seize her, but the priest raised a hand. "She has invoked the ancient bond. The debt is paid. The prisoner is hers." And just like that, the jeers died. The soldiers stepped back. The torch dimmed. The air itself seemed to pause, caught in the tension between fire and fate. Lyra reached for him. Her fingers brushed his arm, lightly, uncertainly, and the world tilted. The air shimmered, as though the sun itself blinked. Somewhere above, a cloud passed before the moon, though the moon should not have been visible in daylight. Kael's voice dropped to a whisper. "The moon sees you." Lyra's pulse thundered in her ears. "Then let her see." The herald shoved his scroll into his belt, cursing under his breath. "Take them both, then, the fool girl and her beast." But when the guards reached for them, Kael moved faster than chains should have allowed. One twist, one glare, and the men faltered as if their strength had been drained from their bones. He didn't strike them. He only looked, and the fear in their eyes said they'd seen something more than human. "Enough," Lyra pleaded softly. "Don't make it worse." Kael turned to her, still breathing hard, then exhaled slowly. The tension left his shoulders. He bowed his head slightly, not to the crowd, but to her. "You bought my life," he murmured. "Now it's yours to command." "Then walk," she whispered. Before they find a reason to take it back, they descended from the platform together. The crowd parted, whispering. Lyra could feel every stare burn against her back, but the world around her seemed distant, muffled, as though time itself had slowed to watch what she had done. The last of her coins were gone. Her name would be cursed before nightfall. But when she glanced sideways, Kale was watching her. Not with gratitude, not even confusion, but with something older and deeper. Recognition. As they passed beneath the shadow of the palace gate, the torches dimmed, the wind fell silent, and the moon, hidden in daylight, shone faintly against the pale sky. It was as if the heavens themselves had stopped to witness a servant girl purchase a king. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, both knew the same truth. With 3 copper coins, she hadn't just bought his freedom. She had bought the beginning of destiny. The palace slept uneasily that night. The echo of the crowd's mockery still clung to the walls, and beneath those marble floors, in the smallest broom closet of the servants' hall, something the kingdom feared most was drawing breath again. Lyra shut the door behind her and pressed her back against it, her chest heaving. The air was thick with the scent of soap, wet straw, and old linen. Kale slumped in the corner, barely conscious, his arms trembling from fever and the wounds that refused to close. The silver burns along his wrists gleamed faintly in the dark like dying embers. She knelt beside him, lifting his head onto her lap. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You're safe here." He let out a low, guttural sound, half a growl, half a groan. "You shouldn't have done it." Lyra brushed damp hair from his brow. "You'd be ash by now if I hadn't." His eyes fluttered open, faintly gold even in the shadows. "Ash is better than debt." "You owe me nothing," she said softly. "I didn't buy you for that." He stared up at her, and for a heartbeat, the beast in him quieted. The hours crawled by. She ground dried herbs in a chipped bowl, mixing them with rainwater she'd collected earlier. The scent of mint and smoke filled the tiny room. Gently, she pressed the poultice against the burns etched into his wrists. He flinched. The silver hissed where the medicine touched. "Easy," she whispered, dabbing again. "It'll cool soon." He watched her hands. "You've done this before." "My mother was a healer," she said. "Before the purges." Kale's gaze darkened. "They killed the moon bloodlines, didn't they?" Lyra froze, then forced herself to nod. "All but one." For a moment, neither spoke. Rain drummed softly on the roof. He tilted his head. "So which are you? The last healer or the last fool?" "Maybe both," she murmured, wringing out the cloth. "Hold still." When she touched his shoulder, the air trembled. A faint hum shivered through the walls, stirring the linens that hung from the shelves. Her palms tingled with the warmth, as though the wounds themselves were breathing beneath her skin. Kale's eyes snapped open, molten gold burning brighter. "What did you just do?" I don't know." "You do," he said, voice low. "You just don't want to believe it." By midnight, the fever took him. His body shook with violent tremors, his breath rasping like wind through broken glass. Lyra panicked. She tore open another pouch of herbs, mixing faster, whispering her mother's old prayers, even though she hadn't believed them in years. The glow from his skin brightened with every touch, heat rolling off him in waves. "Kale, please," she whispered. "You have to fight it." His chains clattered as his hand shot up, gripping her wrist with impossible strength. The mark beneath her skin ignited. Pain flared white hot, yet she couldn't pull away. His eyes were wide open now, no longer human, no longer weak. They blazed like twin suns. His voice came out layered, human and something far older. The moon chose you. The words weren't spoken. They resonated, vibrating through her bones. "Let go," she gasped. "You're hurting me." He didn't. His thumb traced the burning mark on her wrist, and the air around them pulsed, alive, swirling like a storm trapped inside four narrow walls. Then suddenly, the tension broke. Kael's grip softened. His breathing steadied, his gaze locked on hers, feral, pleading, reverent. And before she could think, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cruel. It was instinct. The kind that rewrote fate in the language of heat and breath. For a heartbeat, the world vanished. There was no palace, no chains, no rank or law. Only the pulse of something ancient awakening between them. When he pulled away, her lips tingled, her wrists still glowing faintly. What? What was that? She whispered. Kael's voice was hoarse. Bonding. The moon's way of claiming what destiny has already chosen. That's not possible. It wasn't supposed to be. He closed his eyes, exhaustion dragging him under. The glow from his skin dimmed, leaving faint trails of light across the walls like moonlight spilled on water. Lyra sat frozen. Her wrist still burned. The mark, once invisible, had taken form, a crescent of silver light just below her pulse. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the broom closet felt too small for the enormity of what had just happened. She touched the mark, shivering as it throbbed beneath her fingers. "What have I done?" she whispered to no one. When dawn crept through the cracks in the ceiling, the fever had broken. Kael slept soundly, his wounds already closing. The faint glow from his body had faded, leaving only the echo of warmth in the air. Lyra crouched beside him, studying the man she'd saved. The man who had called her, chosen. Sunlight caught her wrist again. The mark there shimmered, silver white, alive. A quiet certainty settled in her chest, heavier than fear. The bond between them wasn't fading. It was growing. She wiped her hands on her apron, trying to shake the feeling that her life had just split in two. The one she'd lived in obedience, and the one she'd just stepped into by choice. Kael stirred, murmuring her name in his sleep. Lyra froze, heart pounding. He shouldn't know it. She had never told him. Outside, bells began to toll, summoning servants to the morning shift. She rose quickly, pulling her cloak tight. But as she reached for the door, the mark on her wrist flared once more. Silver against the sunlight, whispering like a voice she couldn't quite hear. Destiny had woken, and it would not let her go. The first alarm bell split the dawn. Its clangor rolled through the marble corridors like a scream. Lyra jolted awake. Smoke bit her throat. Somewhere above, men shouted orders. "Seal the gates! Find the girl!" Kael was already on his feet, eyes burning gold again, the faint glow of their bond still visible across her wrist. "They know," he said, voice low and certain. "How?" "Because fate doesn't whisper quietly for long, so." He stepped to the door, listening. Footsteps thundered above the servants' hall. Lyra grabbed the small satchel she'd hidden earlier. Herbs, bread, a strip of cloth still damp from tending his wounds. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "You can't fight an army." Kael looked back at her, a ghost of a smile tugging his mouth. "Not to fight, little healer. To survive." The corridor outside the closet was chaos. Servants ran past with buckets, shouting that the stables were burning. Smoke clawed through the cracks in the ceiling, swallowing the light. Lyra followed Kael down the servants' stairs, heart hammering. Every step was a prayer and a warning. When the first arrow struck the wall beside her head, she flinched. But Kael had already turned, pulling at her behind him. "Gods!" she gasped. "I know." His voice dropped to a growl as he reached for a fallen sword, snapping the head off its shaft. He didn't move like a wounded man anymore. He moved like the storm she'd glimpsed in his eyes that first night. The guards rounded the corner. Kael's blade met theirs. The clang of metal drowned the crackle of fire. Sparks burst from the steel, lighting his face. Wild, unbowed, alive. When the last soldier fell, Lyra stood frozen, shaking. Kael reached for her, his hands still slick with ash and sweat. "Breathe," he said softly. The fires spreading faster than their courage. He led her through a hidden door behind the servants' kitchen. A narrow stair spiraling down into the dark. Smoke followed them, the air thick with heat. "Where does this go?" she asked. "Old escape routes." The palace was built over catacombs from the first reign. Lyra coughed, the air tightening her chest. Her wrist throbbed. That same pulse of silver light, stronger now. Kael noticed. "It warns you, doesn't it?" She hesitated. I think so." "Then listen to it." The sound of boots echoed behind them. Shouts and the ring of armor. Lyra pressed her hand against the wall. The mark burned hotter. "Right," she said suddenly. "There's someone waiting that way." Kael didn't question her. He grabbed her hand and turned down the left corridor instead, just as a rain of arrows sliced through the tunnel behind them. "You see," he said between breaths, "you're more than you think." Lyra swallowed hard. "And you're heavier than I thought," she muttered. Half breathless, half terrified. Kael almost laughed, then stopped trying to drag me and start running. The tunnel opened into a wide stone chamber. The forgotten catacombs beneath the palace courtyard. A single grate led upward, spilling orange light across the floor. Kael climbed first, prying the iron bars free. When he reached down for her, his palm was streaked with soot and blood. "Up," he said. Lyra hesitated, glancing back. Smoke filled the passage behind them. The flames were consuming everything she had ever known. The halls she'd cleaned, the beds she'd made, the world that had never once looked at her. "Lyra," Kael said again, voice gentler this time. "Look at me." She did. If the moon spared me, it was to protect you. Something in the way he said it. Not command, not comfort, but conviction, made her move. She took his hand and let him pull her into the light. They emerged behind the outer stables. Horses screamed in their stalls, terrified. Guards shouted orders somewhere near the north wall. Kael pulled her toward the shadows of the courtyard's edge. Her mark flared again. "Stop!" she whispered. They're coming from the left. He turned immediately, ducking into the old armory. A narrow hall filled with rusted spears and half-broken shields. He grabbed one, testing its balance. You were born for this, he murmured. I was born to scrub floors. Then the moon has a cruel sense of humor. The air shivered, a warning. Lyra didn't think. She grabbed Kael's sleeve and pulled him down, just as 3 arrows sliced overhead, embedding into the wall. See? He said, grinning out despite the chaos. You listen better than a soldier. She glared. And you talk too much for a fugitive. They ran again. The palace yard was chaos incarnate. Servants fleeing, fire devouring the stables, and smoke twisting around the towers like black serpents. Kael moved with lethal grace, ducking behind overturned carts, guiding her through the confusion. When a group of soldiers blocked their path to the gates, he turned to her. Close your eyes, he said. What? Just do it. She obeyed. A roar split the air. The ground trembled underfoot. Even with her eyes closed, Lyra felt the rush of power. Something primal, vast, unstoppable. The soldiers screamed. When she opened her eyes again, Kael stood in the clearing smoke. His shackles melted to slag at his feet. The scent of burned silver filled the air. His eyes glowed gold, his breath visible even through the heat. The beast had woken. Kael, she whispered. He turned to her, still half shadow, half man. Run! They reached the outer gates, just as the towers above them began to collapse. Kael forced the gates apart with his bare hands. The metal groaned, bending under a strength that wasn't human. Lyra stumbled through, coughing, her lungs aching. Behind them, the palace that had been her whole life burned, its spires melting into a red dawn. Kael paused, staring back at the inferno. Everything they built was fire waiting to happen, he said quietly. Lyra turned to him, tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. And everything I knew just burned with it. Kael faced her fully then. His expression softened, and for a heartbeat, the beast faded, leaving only the man. Then build something new, he said with me. The words were a vow and an invitation both. By the time the first soldiers reached the courtyard, the fugitives were gone. Lyra and Kael crossed the outer fields under the cover of Mick, moving toward the line of dark trees that marked the edge of the king's land. Each step was agony. Fear, exhaustion, wonder, all tangled together. When they reached the forest's edge, Kael stopped. The moon hung faintly above the burning horizon, pale and watching. He looked at her, his hand hovering close but not touching. If the moon spared me, he said again, his voice a quiet oath, it was to protect you. Lyra met his gaze. Then let's make it worth her mercy. They stepped into the forest together, vanishing beneath its silver canopy, while behind them, the palace, her prison, his cage, collapsed into ash. The fire roared one last time as if the kingdom itself was screaming farewell to the girl who had rewritten its fate. The forest north of the capital stretched endless and untamed, a world untouched by crown or chain. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and rain. For the first time in her life, Lyra walked without walls around her. No bells calling her to duty, no footsteps echoing above her. Freedom, she realized, was not silent. It hummed, Alive, unpredictable, dangerous. They travelled by moonlight, following narrow deer paths that wove through the trees. When exhaustion forced them to stop, Kael found shelter in the ruins of an ancient shrine. The stone pillars had long since crumbled, but faint carvings still marked the walls. Wolves and moons intertwined, half hidden by ivy. This place was sacred to the old tribes, Kael said quietly, as he brushed ash from the carvings. The Moonborn prayed here before your kings called us demons. Lyra traced the symbols with her fingertips. The moment her skin met the stone, warmth pulsed beneath her palm. A living heartbeat buried deep in the rock. Kael, she whispered. He turned. The temple recognizes you, he said, eyes narrowing with awe. Moonblood runs thicker than you thought. She stepped back. I don't understand. My mother never told me. She couldn't, he interrupted. To speak the truth would have signed her death warrant. The royal creed outlawed every healer, every wolf touched by the moon. Your bloodline survived by pretending to forget what it was. The words hit like thunder. Lyra looked down at her hands, the faint silver glow returning to her skin. And what am I then? Kael's gaze softened. What you've always been, the bridge between worlds. Days turned into weeks. The deeper they moved into the wild, the stronger her power became. It started with whispers, the pulse of fear in birds before a storm, the shudder of a rabbit when predators were near. Then it reached people. She began to feel Kael's emotions. Brief flashes of frustration, pain, longing, before he said a word. At first, it frightened her. What if I can't stop it? She asked one night, hands trembling over a dying fire. Kael watched the flames with eyes that caught every flicker. Fear is only power you haven't learned to name. The more you fight it, the louder it becomes. She scowled. You sound like a priest. He smiled faintly. I've killed a few. Comforting. Honesty is never comforting. He stood, walking closer until she could see the faint reflection of the firelight in his gold eyes. Close your eyes, he said. Listen. She obeyed. The forest murmured. Wind, insects, the steady rhythm of their two heartbeats. What do you feel? Everything, she whispered. You, the trees, the cold. And what does fear say? She paused, shivering. That I'll lose control. He touched her wrist. The mark glowed faintly under his fingers. Then don't. Let it speak, not command. When she opened her eyes, he was still watching her, the beast in him quiet for once. By the time they reached the mountain valleys, Kael's wounds had healed. His posture changed. Straighter, sure. Every movement deliberate. The chains no longer marked him as prisoner. They marked him as survivor. That night, under a sky streaked with silver, he finally told her the truth. I wasn't captured in battle, he said. I was betrayed. By the council I trusted. Lyra frowned. Why? Because peace is bad for men who profit from war. He stared into the fire. The royal council feared my pack's power. They lured me south with a treaty and sold me to your king for silver and a crown. She went still. Then you are? The Alpha King of the Moonborn, he finished, last of the Wolf Lords. If prophecy holds true, the fire popped, sparks drifting into the night. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. You let me touch you, heal you. You could have... Run, he said. Killed you? His mouth curved faintly. Perhaps, but I didn't. Why not? Because the first time you touched me, I felt the moon in your blood. And because I wanted to see if destiny could still surprise me. He reached into his cloak and drew a small pendant. A crescent, carved from bone, worn smooth with age. He turned it over in his hand. My mother once told me of a prophecy heard, he said, that the Alpha who loves the moon's daughter will bring down kingdoms. I never believed it until you. Lyra shook her head. I'm no one's daughter but a servant's ghost. Then why does the moon follow you? He countered. Why did the temple awaken at your touch? She looked away, heart pounding. If that's true, then loving me will destroy you. Kael's smile was tired, but genuine. You can't destroy what's already been betrayed. She stared into the fire, trying to ignore the pull between them. The quiet gravity of something neither wanted to name. The nights grew colder. Kael hunted to feed them both, always returning with his cloak torn, the scent of blood trailing after him. Sometimes, when the moon was high, Lyra caught glimpses of his shadow stretching too long. Not man-shaped, but something larger. She didn't fear it anymore. Instead, she feared the way her heart beat when he returned. He taught her to move silently, to read the forest the way wolves did. By scent, by silence, by instinct. In return, she taught him the language of herbs, the meaning of mercy. Together, they began to rebuild something that wasn't quite peace, but wasn't war either. One evening, as they rested beside the ruins of another shrine, she touched the mark on her wrist. It pulsed in rhythm with the glow in his eyes. What happens when we reach the north? She asked. Then I take back my kingdom, he said. And me? He looked at her, voice softer than the wind. You already have yours. That night, she woke to a strange warmth spreading through her palms. The ground beneath her shimmered faintly. Flowers bloomed through cracks in the stone, glowing silver beneath the moon. Kael stirred beside her, instantly alert. Lyra? I didn't do anything. Yes, you did, he said, eyes wide. You're awakening. The light spread up her arms, tracing veins of silver through her skin. She gasped as visions flooded her. Wolves howling across snowy peaks, a crown of bone and moonlight, the world bending at the touch of love and ruin. When the light faded, she fell into Kael's arms, trembling. He caught her easily, pressing her hand to his chest. Breathe, he murmured. You're not alone in it. She met his gaze through tears. The prophecy... Kael nodded slowly. It's already begun. Later, as she drifted towards sleep, Kael's voice reached her. Low, rough, almost a prayer. The Alpha who loves the moon's daughter will bring down kingdoms, he whispered. So let them fall. Lyra smiled weakly. You sound unafraid. I am, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Because I already lost everything worth fearing. And now I've found what's worth protecting. The bond mark between them glowed once more. Soft, silver, alive. And in that silent forest, under the watchful moon, the bloodline that had slept for generations finally awakened. By the time they reached the borderlands, peace had turned to rumor and rumor to fear. Lyra's name traveled faster than footsteps. The witch who bewitched a beast, the servant who stole an alpha from his chains. The bounty posters went up by the hundreds, each one bearing the same words stamped in red wax. Wanted. Lyra of the Moon. Reward, 10,000 silver coins, dead or alive. And below it, in smaller script, her companion, the traitor Kale of the Moonborn, slay on sight. They hid among the rebel camps scattered across the high plains. Outlaws, deserters, and exiles who claimed no banner but survival. To them, Kale was not a king, only a weapon. And Lyra was his shadow, the strange girl who healed wounds with light and left no scar. Your face is everywhere, a rebel woman told her one night, tossing a parchment into the fire. The crown's afraid of you. Lyra stared at the burning paper, watching her own eyes vanish in the flames. They should be afraid of what they created. Kale said nothing, sitting apart from the others, sharpening the edge of his blade. He no longer hid what he was. Not from her. The faint mark of the moon still glowed on his chest, where the silver brands had once been. That night, he spoke quietly beside her. They won't stop hunting. You should go north without me. She shook her head. You taught me to listen to fear, and mine says I stay. He smiled at that, small and tired. Then your fear is wiser than mine. A week later, their hiding place was sold for a handful of coins. The boy who betrayed them wasn't cruel, only hungry. He'd been one of the youngest rebels, barely 15, with a sister dying of fever. I'm sorry, he whispered. When they found him bleeding in the dirt, silver coins clutched in his palm. They promised medicine. I didn't know they'd come so soon. Lyra knelt beside him, her voice breaking. You knew enough, Kale's jaw tightened. We can't stay. The first arrow struck the trees behind them, hissing with the sharp scent of oil and silver. The night erupted in chaos. Torches flared between the trees, turning the dark forest into a cage of orange light. Soldiers fanned out in perfect formation, their armor glinting like frost. Kyle moved first, faster than any human, his blade a streak of moonlit steel. Lyra followed close, using her power to sense each heartbeat, each ambush before it struck. Left, she shouted, behind the oak. He turned just in time, cutting down a soldier who'd aimed for her throat. But there were too many. Every time they struck one down, 2 more appeared. Go, Kael barked. I won't. The word died on her tongue. Fear whistled through the air. She felt the rush of wind before it hit. Kael moved between her and death. The silver head buried itself in his side with a sickening crack. Lyra screamed. Kael staggered, ripping the spear free, his hands already slick with blood. Smoke rose from the wound where silver met skin, sizzling as though the fire of the forge still clung to it. No, she gasped, catching him as he fell to one knee. Run, he growled. I can't. Now! His voice broke on the word. She pressed her hands to the wound, light flaring from her palms, desperate, untrained. I can heal it. Just hold still. The light fizzled and died, snuffed out by the poison's heat. Kael's breath came ragged. It's not meant for healing. It's meant for killing our kind. His legs buckled and Lyra dragged him upright with all the strength she had left. The forest tilted around them. Behind them, soldiers shouted, closing in. She forced him to move, half carrying, half dragging. "Lyra," he murmured, his voice fading. "Leave me." "Don't tell me what to do." They fled through the highlands, the wind carrying the scent of blood and iron. Lyra's arms trembled under his weight, her lungs burning. The moonlight flickered across the slopes, guiding her through paths only madness would take. When at last they reached the base of the mountains, she collapsed beside a frozen stream. Kael was pale, his skin marked with veins of black where the poison spread. "Stay awake," she pleaded. "Please." He tried to speak, but only blood touched his lips. She wiped it away with shaking fingers. "Don't talk," she whispered. "Save your strength." He smiled weakly. "Still giving orders." She glared through tears. "Because you never listen." He reached up, brushing her face with trembling fingers. "You shouldn't have come this far." "You told me to listen to the moon," she said. "She led me here." His hand fell away. Then the moon must have a cruel sense of mercy. She built a fire with shaking hands, using the last of her herbs to dull his pain. As the flames caught, she looked up. The sky above was wrong. The moon hung heavy and dim, her light fading into shadow. Kael noticed too. "An omen," he whispered. "Judgment." Lyra shook her head fiercely. "No, not yet. You're not dying for me." He chuckled weakly. "Seems that's all I've done since we met." "Don't!" Her voice cracked. "You're the Alpha King. You're supposed to be unstoppable." "Kings fall like anyone else." His eyes softened. "But maybe. Destiny doesn't have to end the way it began." She leaned close, her forehead against his. "Then say it. Say we can change it." He smiled faintly. "Destiny can be rewritten." The wind howled through the valley like a promise and a threat. Kael's eyes fluttered shut, his breathing shallow. Lyra's power pulsed weakly beneath her skin, but the poison had stolen too much of her strength. She held him tighter, whispering the same words over and over. "We can rewrite it. We will." Above them, the moon sank into darkness. Not gone, but watching, as if weighing the worth of their defiance. And in that silence between one heartbeat and the next, the world held its breath. The hunt of silver had begun, and it would not end until blood and prophecy were won. The mountains slept under a veil of cloud and frost. The wind howled like an ancient prayer, sweeping over the ruins where stone wolves guarded broken altars. It was here beneath the shattered crescent of the old moon shrine that Lyra laid Kael down, his breath faint, his skin cold as ash. He had stopped speaking hours ago. The silver poison had reached his heart. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered, pressing her hands against his chest. Her voice echoed through the hollow temple like a plea and a curse. "You said destiny could be rewritten, so wake up and write it with me." Nothing. The moon above flickered, her light dimming like a candle fighting death. Lyra fell to her knees beside the altar, tears smearing dirt across her cheeks. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of rain and iron. Lyra looked up at the cracked statue of the moon goddess, a woman carved in stone, arms outstretched as if weighing mercy against judgment. "Please," Lyra begged, voice breaking. "Take it. Take my power, take me, just let him live." Her mark blazed white hot. Light burst from her palms, spilling across Kael's body, seeping into the cracks of the altar. The world shuddered. The ruins trembled as a wave of radiance exploded outward. Blinding, pure, unstoppable. Every living thing across the kingdom felt it. In the capital, soldiers dropped their blades mid-swing, collapsing as visions tore through them. Images of the pain they'd caused, the lives they'd broken. Nobles in silken halls wept without knowing why. Wolves howled in the forests, their hearts echoing with the ache of every creature they had ever hunted. The kingdom stopped breathing for one heartbeat, and for the first time in generations felt. Back at the shrine, Lyra's scream joined the wind. The light pouring from her body consumed the darkness, then vanished all at once. Silence. When the light faded, Kael gasped, his body jerking upward. His wounds were gone. The silver stain had vanished from his veins. "Lyra?" His voice was raw, disbelieving. She looked at him, eyes glassy with exhaustion. Her skin was pale, her lips trembling, but her mark was gone. Completely gone. Kael's relief shattered into dread. "What did you do?" Lyra smiled faintly. "I made a trade." "What kind of trade?" She touched her chest, where the bond mark had once glowed. "You gave me freedom once. I gave it back." He caught her face in his hands. "No. No, Lyra. Your empathy. Your gift. It's gone." She blinked at him, her gaze distant. "I don't feel it anymore. The fear. The grief. The world's pain." Her hand trembled against his cheek. "But I still see you." Kael's throat tightened. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers, tears burning his eyes. "You were supposed to heal me, not destroy yourself." Lyra smiled weakly. "I didn't destroy anything, I just gave it back to where it came from." A sudden chill filled the air. The wind stopped. The forest around the shrine fell silent. Then the moon spoke. Her voice wasn't sound. It was vibration, thunder, and heartbeat woven together. It filled the ruins, the mountains, the sky. "You have balanced what was broken," the goddess said. "Love has rewritten the wound of fate." The clouds shifted, revealing the full face of the moon, no longer dim but glowing with a terrible beauty. Yet every gift bears a cost. The bond that defied destiny now stands at the edge of its own undoing. Kael rose to his knees, shielding Lyra instinctively. "Take me instead." But the moon's voice ignored him, turning softer, almost sorrowful. "Return before dawn, or lose your bond forever." The light faded. The wind returned, rustling through the broken stone. Lyra stared up at the sky, her expression unreadable. Kael took her hands, pressing them to his heart. "We'll go back," he swore, "before dawn, before anything can take you from me." She nodded, though her eyes looked far away, as if the world had turned hollow around her. "What are you hearing?" he whispered. Nothing, she said quietly. And that's the scariest part. He gathered her into his arms, wrapping her in his cloak. The night air carried the faint scent of ash and moonlight. As they left the shrine, the stone wolves turned their heads ever so slightly toward them. Stone no longer, but alive for a breath. Above, the moon shone brighter than she had in 100 years. Her judgment suspended, her bargain sealed. By the time they reached the ridge overlooking the valley, dawn was bleeding through the clouds. Kea looked back once at the ancient temple, its stones glowing faintly in the new light. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Lyra didn't answer immediately. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of pine and smoke. "Regret?" she said at last. "No. But I wonder what kind of person I'll be without feeling everything." He brushed his thumb across her wrist, tracing the place where her mark used to be. "Then I'll feel for both of us." Her eyes softened. "And if you can't?" He smiled faintly. "Then I'll learn." The first rays of sun broke over the peaks. They turned toward the east, the world behind them trembling under the weight of what had just been awakened. And somewhere far above, the moon watched in silence, neither blessing nor cursing them, only waiting to see if love's bargain would hold. The moon courtyard shimmered under silver light, its marble columns wrapped in flowering vines. Once, it had been a place of punishment and spectacle, where chains rattled and the desperate prayed for mercy that never came. Now, it was quiet, peaceful, alive. Lyra knelt beside the old altar, her hands deep in the soil. The earth was warm beneath her fingers, rich and forgiving. She planted rows of moonleaf and white heather, the same herbs she'd used to heal wounds in secret back when compassion was a crime. The courtyard smelled of rain and new beginnings. A soft voice behind her said, "You still refuse to let anyone else tend this garden." She smiled without looking up. The moon doesn't ask for perfection, only care. Kale stepped into the light, the silver threads of his robe catching the glow of the night sky. The crown on his brow was simple. No jewels, no gold, just a single crescent of carved bone. It suited him. The Alpha King who had once been a captive now ruled a kingdom reborn. It had been a year since the moon's bargain. The scars of war had faded into memory, replaced by unity Lyra never thought she'd see. Titsen. The nobles who once hunted wolves now knelt beside them during the harvest rites. Healers trained in the open. Children born of mixed bloodlines played beneath banners stitched with both fang and moon. They called it the Year of Silver Peace. Lyra had no titles, no throne, but her presence in the palace was legend. They said the king's heart beat to the rhythm of her name, that her silence, once seen as loss, was the kingdom's compass, the still point that kept the world from tearing itself apart again. Kael never called her queen. He called her balance. That night, the full moon hung low and bright over the courtyard. The people gathered in quiet reverence. Shifters, healers, humans, wolves, all standing as one. The priestess spoke the ancient vow. Under the silver light, all souls are equal. Under her gaze, none are forgotten. When she finished, Kael stepped forward, his golden eyes finding Lyra among the crowd. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. The same breath, the same heartbeat, that had begun in chains and ended in peace. He extended his hand. "Walk with me." They stood before the altar where it had all begun. The same stone, the same moonlight, but no fear this time. Kael took her hand, his thumb brushing the faint trace of the mark that had never returned. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" She tilted her head, smiling softly. "That the moon doesn't make mistakes?" He nodded. "You were right." His voice deepened, carrying through the courtyard like a vow. "You saved my soul when you kissed a captive. Let me spend forever proving I was worthy." Lyra's eyes glistened in the silver light. "You were never a captive, Kael," she said. "The moon just waited for you to see it." The crowd fell silent as they clasped hands. The air shimmered around them, soft as breath, strong as fate. Then the moonlight itself descended, a veil of silver weaving through their fingers, sealing them not in fire or prophecy, but in peace. A voice rose on the wind, gentle, familiar, ancient. "The girl who spent her last coins now owns the hearts of kings." Lyra's eyes lifted to the sky. The moon glowed brighter, not as judge or queen, but as witness. Kael bowed his head beside her. For the first time, no crown separated them. No prophecy chained them. Just two souls, one who had been broken by cruelty, the other who had defied it, standing in the light of what they had rebuilt together. Later that night, when the celebration faded and torches dimmed, Lyra returned to her garden. The herbs she had planted swayed gently in the midnight breeze, silver dew beading on every leaf. Kael joined her in silence, kneeling beside her in the soil. "You still work like a servant," he teased softly. "And you still watch like a wolf," she replied. He laughed quietly. "Then we haven't changed at all." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Oh, Kael, we just remembered who we were before the world forgot." He brushed his fingers through her hair. "And who are we now?" Lyra looked up at the moon, her eyes reflecting its glow. "The proof," she whispered, "that even the smallest act of mercy can rewrite destiny." In the distance, bells rang across the kingdom. Soft, rhythmic, a New Year's chagigchi. Wolves howled from the northern hills, not in mourning, but in joy. The moon courtyard shimmered brighter than ever, and from its heart, two figures stood entwined beneath the silver light, not rulers and subjects, not Alpha and Omega, but soul and soul, bound by choice. And high above, the moon's voice drifted once more, faint as a sigh, eternal as the sky. Fate is not written in stars, but in the hands that choose to heal. The girl who once spent her last coins to free a stranger had become the queen who brought back the soul of a kingdom.